state and national media organizations, bench and bar associations, and others that hopefully begin to address the large rift between the expectations of the public and having a judiciary that faithfully complies with the law and the Code of Judicial Conduct.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Cohen?
Here.
Here. Please mark Assemblywoman Kasama absent excused for the moment. I do expect her to be joining us here shortly. That means we do have a quorum. Good morning to committee members. Good morning to guests that we may have on the Zoom today. And good morning to those who might be watching on the internet. Welcome to day 64 of the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature. With those matters behind us, committee, we have 3 bills on the agenda today. Just so everybody knows, we're going to take Assembly Bill 43 first. And so at this time, I will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 43. Assembly Bill 43 revises provisions governing judicial discipline. And before I hand it over for the presentation on the bill, I wanted to let members know that there is an amendment on Nellis. That amendment does come from me, and it essentially replaces the bill with some very concise language. So hopefully you all got that email message I sent yesterday and didn't spend time reviewing the original bill. So at this time, I'm going to welcome to the Assembly Judiciary Committee, Mr. Keith Lee, and I'm going to give him a chance to talk a little bit about the bill as amended, and then we'll have an opportunity for some questions, I'm sure. So welcome, Mr. Lee, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Keith Lee here on behalf of the Nevada Judges of Limited Jurisdiction. The Nevada Judges of Limited Jurisdiction are essentially the justices of the peace and the municipal court judges in the state of Nevada. First, let me say it's a pleasure to finally appear before this committee on day 64, albeit virtually, and hopefully soon we will all be able to get together and in a more personal way. But with that, Mr. Chair, I will make a brief presentation regarding AB 43. AB 43 was brought by this Judiciary Committee on behalf of the Nevada Supreme Court at the request of the Nevada Judges of Limited Jurisdiction to address some procedural concerns that the Nevada Judges of Limited Jurisdiction have had with the Judicial Discipline Commission. As you've indicated, Mr. Chair, you've submitted a proposed amendment to AB 43, the essence of which deletes the bill in its entirety and requests the Nevada Supreme Court to study and make recommendations concerning the procedural and substantive statutes and rules of the Judicial Discipline Commission and to report back to the legislature. Because of the time constraints of this session and the complexity of the issues raised in AB 43, the Nevada Judges of Limited Jurisdiction have consulted with you, Mr. Chair, as well as with Chief Justice Hardesty, and after that consultation, agree that this is a better way to go with respect to this bill. We believe that such a study committee will provide an open and public forum to examine the procedural and substantive statutes and rules of the Judicial Discipline Commission, and will allow interested parties to spend more time discussing the issues and hopefully arriving at some recommendations that can be made back to the legislature. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions you have. We do urge the committee to consider your amendment and to adopt it and proceed forward with the study committee. I might add one final thing, that this study committee would not be new. We had a similar study committee, I think it began in 2006 or 2007, at the request of then Chief Justice Bob Rose. And as a result of that study committee, which we've characterized as the Article 6 study committee, recommendations were made to the legislature in the 2009 session that were subsequently adopted in AB 496 of that session. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your time and the committee's time, and we'll try to answer any questions that you or members of the committee may have.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Lee, and I will confirm for committee members as well that I have discussed this amendment with Chief Justice Hardesty to, in fact, make sure that the court was not going to be offended or opposed to the amendment, and I can confirm that In fact, Justice Hardesty is okay with this amendment, and I believe welcomes an opportunity to look further at this issue in the interim. With that, though, let me ask if we have any questions from committee members about the amendment to Assembly Bill 43.
Yeah, can we amend and do pass?
We will be able to at the end of the hearing if we can sit tight, Assemblyman Wheeler. Appreciate the suggestion. Any questions? I know it's pretty straightforward, but want to make sure I give folks a chance if there are questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, which I think is perfectly acceptable for this sort of amendment on a bill at this point in session. So, Mr. Lee, I want to thank you for presenting. I'll give you a chance to do any wrap up once we get a chance to get through any testimony on the measure. So, I will now move to testimony in support of Assembly Bill 43. Mr. Deyhle, I know you're on the Zoom with us, and I didn't know what your official position on the measure was. Are you in support of the measure?
The conceptual amendment, yes, the Commission is.
Okay, please go ahead with, we'll take your testimony at this time then. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chairman Yeager and committee members. For the record, I am Paul Deyhle, General Counsel and Executive Director of the Nevada Judicial Discipline Commission. My testimony here today will be very brief. At Chairman Yeager's request and by virtue of the anticipated deletion of the bill in its entirety and its replacement with a conceptual amendment asking the Supreme Court to study and make recommendations concerning the procedural and substantive statutes and rules of the Judicial Discipline Commission. I did prepare a much lengthier presentation, but in light of the deletion of the bill and the conceptual amendment, I only have a few statements which should take no more than a few minutes. Although I will not be discussing them, I would also like to thank Chairman Yeager for allowing the exhibits submitted by the Commission to be part of the record with respect to this bill and any subsequent study that may follow. In accordance with the principle of separation of powers, if the Nevada Supreme Court decides to undertake such a study as contemplated by the conceptual amendment and establish another Article 6 commission as it did in 2006, then the Commission will fully participate in that process as it has in the past. I do believe that another Article 6 commission, if deemed warranted and necessary by the Supreme Court under the circumstances, would be the most appropriate, if not the only mechanism by which to fairly and adequately represent the interests of not only the judiciary and the Commission, but also, most importantly, the public, the very people the Nevada Constitution has empowered the Commission to protect, while at the same time giving due regard to the vast body of judicial disciplinary jurisprudence and precedent that has existed and developed throughout this country for decades. Notwithstanding whether another Article 6 commission will be impaneled by the Supreme Court or not, I would like each of you to know that there will be certain undertakings planned by both the Commission and the Nevada Supreme Court over the next 2 years that I believe will go a long way in addressing and attempting to close the rather large divide that currently exists between the Commission and a relatively small number of limited jurisdiction judges. These undertakings will present many opportunities for professional and honest dialogue between the Commission, the judiciary, and the public, as well as a greater understanding of the issues and challenges faced by all concerned. For example, the Commission is in the process of revising its procedural rules, which have not, in large part, been revised since 2003 when the Commission adopted them from the Supreme Court pursuant to a constitutional amendment. As you may or may not know, the Commission's procedural rules were adopted by the Supreme Court in the 1970s and were included in the Supreme Court rules for decades until as recently as 2003, when the Commission adopted them from the Supreme Court. This process will be fully transparent, with the bench, bar, and public being given the opportunity to comment on the revised rules and submit proposed changes, much like the Supreme Court undertakes revisions to its own rules. Additionally, the Supreme Court recently advised me that the court is planning on revising the Code of Judicial Conduct, which, as you know, the Commission enforces, and asked if we would participate and provide input into that process, to which the Commission enthusiastically agreed, as it has in years past. This will be yet another opportunity for the bench, bar, and public to weigh in on the proposed changes to the code in a fully transparent manner. And lastly, the Commission has some proposals of its own that it looks forward to presenting before the Judicial Council public interest and advocacy groups, state and national media organizations, bench and bar associations, and others that hopefully begin to address the large rift between the expectations of the public and having a judiciary that faithfully complies with the law and the Code of Judicial Conduct and respects the fundamental rights of litigants as they are commissioned to do, and the judiciary's expectation not to be brought up on public charges or discipline for their discretionary decisions on the bench. In conclusion, if these efforts prove to be productive, and I am cautiously optimistic that they will, then it is the Commission's hope that the 2023 legislature will not have to entertain another bill such as AB 43. As it relates to the Commission, you have its assurance that it is and will be fully committed to these endeavors in the months and years ahead. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Mr. Deyhle. I appreciate that. And I don't believe we have questions at the moment. So again, I want to thank you for testifying in support this morning. Let me check to see if there's anybody else on the Zoom in support. I don't believe we have anybody, but if I'm wrong about that, if you could turn your camera on, unmute, and let me know you'd like to offer testimony in support. I don't see that happening on the Zoom. BPS, could we go to the phone lines at this time to see if there's anybody there who would like to testify in support?
And we will begin with caller with the last three digits of 300. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Michael Hillerby, Hillerby, on behalf of the Nevada District Judges Association, would like to echo the comments in support of the bill with the proposed amendments from my friend, Mr. Lee. The district judges, again, want to be on record in support of the bill with the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and support, Mr. Hillerby. BPS, are there additional callers in support?
And Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I will close neutral testimony. And before I hand it back over for concluding remarks, I wanted to note for the record that Assemblywoman Hanson is present. I think I forgot to address that she was not here at the time roll was called, but she is now present. So, Madam Secretary, if you could mark her present. And I do believe Assemblywoman Kasama is presenting in another committee this morning. So when she gets back, we'll mark her as present as well. But I think she is still absent for the moment. So with the testimony behind us, Mr. Lee, I'd like to just hand it over if you had any concluding remarks on Assembly Bill 43 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. No, I have no closing comments other than to urge you all to adopt the amendment to, as you have proposed, to AB 43, and we can move forward. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time and consideration this morning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lee, for presenting, and thank you to Mr. Deyhle for being here as well. Mr. Hillerby on the phone, we appreciate it. I'm going to close the hearing on Assembly Bill 43. Before we move to the next bill, this is deadline week, as you know, so things will be moving quickly, and I wanted to note for the record that under rule number 57 of our Assembly standing rules of the 81st session, with either approval of the speaker or unanimous consent to waive the 24-hour waiting period, that can be waived and we can take final action on a bill after the close of hearing. So I am pleased to report this morning that I do have the consent of the speaker to waive Rule 57 with respect to Assembly Bill 43, which we just heard. So given that, committee, I would be looking for a motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 43.
Move, Mr. Chair.
I'd second.
We have a motion from Assemblyman Wheeler. We have a second from Vice Chair Wynn. Now, normally, committee, in the past, we've done a roll call vote, but we have a lot of bills to get through this week. So I'm going to try to do this in a little bit of a different way that should speed things up. So before I take the vote, which is going to be a voice vote, I wanted to ask for a show of hands of anyone on the committee who is intending to vote no on the measure. Is there anyone out there who is going to be a no on Assembly Bill 43? I don't see any no's, so what I'm going to do is take a voice vote, and then I'll just confirm that we don't have any no's. So if you could all unmute yourselves on the committee. And at this time, again, the motion is to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 43. Would all of those in favor please signify by saying aye?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And are there any opposed? If so, could you please say nay? Okay, I don't hear any opposed, so that motion does carry. All who are present voted in favor of it. So committee, thank you. And that's one less bill we'll have to work session throughout the week. So again, thank you, Mr. Lee and Mr. Deyhle, for being here, and look for the bill to hit the assembly floor once we have an amendment formalized and we can report it out of committee.